Looking for real stories that lift you up? Welcome to Inspire and Impact, the podcast where purpose meets perseverance. This is where transformation begins and your story continues.
Welcome to the Inspire and Impact podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Rosenstein. The show features real conversations with thought leaders, healers, entrepreneurs, and creatives who share their journeys of growth, purpose, and making a meaningful impact. Today, I have the honor of interviewing Deb Monfette. Deb, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you, Daniel. It's great to be here.
Great. Can you share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I have been around for a while, over 3 decades, and it's a combination of corporate. I was in corporate for over 2 decades, working on all sorts of new innovative products, especially for digital transformation. And then when I left corporate, I ended up working as a consultant for corporations in content marketing. So I was doing a lot of their content marketing, and I still have that business. And I've also branched out into working with entrepreneurs and coaches, helping them with their businesses as a business advisor, helping them to simplify and clarify what they're doing and reach their audience in a more profound way to create a bigger impact and greater income.
So what inspired you to want to help other people?
Well, again, I think it started with, I've always been in the creative space, but more also creative problem solving. And so when I graduated from CMU, I went into a startup, and I've been in about 4 since. And that was transforming the packaging industry into digital. And so it was really important to be able to understand what the industry was about and where the possibilities were to take it into digital. But I also had to really understand the people involved and how I would actually communicate this new way of working with them. So it was always about connecting and building trust, because otherwise nothing will work if you don't do that, because they've been doing work a certain way for decades or century, even like a century. And so you really have to dig into what makes them, why they're doing their work, why it's important, and how to get them to understand the changes that they need to make. And so it's been kind of like that ever since. And so it's almost like a natural progression to eventually end up with entrepreneurs, because everything is, they're actually trying to create messages that inspire people and make an impact. And every entrepreneur, in my opinion, is different, regardless if they're in the same industry as thousands of others, but it's the way they do things is different. So that's kind of what got me inspired to start working with entrepreneurs as well.
So can you maybe share an inspiring story from your career that profoundly shaped your vision of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, actually, I would like to tell you about what my company, when I first started the entrepreneur space, I called my company Irresistible Content because of my marketing background. But I realized that while it sounded catchy, something felt off, because it didn't capture the depth of what I really wanted to do and how I really wanted to make people feel. And so I realized that it wasn't just about content. It was more about people and connections, meaning, alignment, those sorts of things. And at the same time, 2 words kept following me everywhere. One was I matter. Another one was this matters. And I just started thinking about the term. I would see it in conversations, in client sessions, even in the news. Everything matters. So I felt like the universe was trying to get my attention, kind of like those quiet nudges that you can't ignore. And so one day I attended a webinar with Dan Heath. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but his book is The Power of Moments: Why Certain Experiences Have Extraordinary Impact. And that webinar kind of changed everything. During the webinar, Dan shared a story about his trip to LA. And before that, he did some research. And according to TripAdvisor, the top 3 hotels in LA were basically what you'd expect: the Beverly Hills Hotel, the Bel Air Hotel, and the Peninsula. And the rooms were about $700 a night, and probably today there are likely more. But the number 4 was called the Magic Castle Hotel, and it was only $199 a night. But the reviews were off the charts. So Dan had to see what this hype was all about. So he actually booked a night there. And so when he arrived, he basically was stunned. It wasn't luxury at all. It was a modest, bright yellow, 1950 style apartment complex that they turned into a hotel. And when he got into his room with the view was a back alley. And he said, "This doesn't make sense. It's certainly not a 5-star hotel, nor is it a magic castle, like it appeared in the advertisement." But he asked himself, why is this number 4? And so he decided to take a tour of the grounds, and he went out to the pool. It was a really hot afternoon. And what was called an Olympic-sized pool was really the size of a backyard pool. And that's when he spotted it. It was a red phone called the Popsicle Hotline. And at the Magic Castle Hotel, when the heat is on, you simply pick up the red phone and call the hotline. And what happens is, within minutes, a concierge in white gloves delivers a popsicle on a silver platter to you for free. And all snacks are free as well. So he looked around, the kids went wild, parents were all lit up, everybody was joyful. And he described this as a peak moment. It wasn't about luxury. The hotel itself was actually forgettable, but the experience was unique. It was memorable. It's a break the script moment, as he calls it. And he said it was simply extraordinary. So the host asked Dan, why did this moment stand out to you? And he said, because when I got that popsicle, it wasn't about the treat. It was about how it was delivered. Basically, how it made me feel. That small gesture made me feel like I mattered. And that was it. That was the final nudge I needed. So when I got off the webinar, I instantly knew I had to change everything. But here's the problem. My website was already built. Funnels were done. My CRM was done. All the email sequences, my links, my masterclass, my challenge, which I've already done. And it was all done. And I sat there for a while and said, I have to do this. So I scrapped it all. I was able to, I searched for the name, I Matter, and the only thing I could get was imattermarketing.com. So I purchased the name and I renamed my business. And I thought about it. And that's really what real marketing and real business is about. It's not clever hooks or funnel hacks. It's about making people feel seen, heard, and understood and feel like they matter. So that's the work I do now, is helping people connect to their message and connect their message to the right audience in a way that's real, human, and unforgettable. And since then, I've evolved into business advisory, but the heart is still the same, because you can't have a business basically without marketing. And at the core, it's really at the core of both. And so the core of a person's deep desire is that we all share, is to matter. Because when people feel like they matter, whether it's your audience, your clients, your team, everything changes. So that's how I came up with my name, I Matter Marketing, and how it evolved.
Wow, that's a really interesting story. I mean, thank you so much for sharing that.
You're
And I
welcome.
agree with you, like, from a market, because I do have a marketing background myself. Like, when you realize your audience matters, and who, you learn who they are and what makes them tick and their interests, then you're able to be a better marketer. So that's really important. I really like that phrase that you kind of like incorporate into your business and your marketing. And that's really important, because you said now in the world of like AI, it seems like a lot of people are going the opposite. It's like they're trying to automate everything and take the person at the human aspect out of marketing, where it's now just like push a button, let AI do everything, and you don't think about what's really happening at the human level.
No, you don't. And the thing is, if you think about it, they got raving reviews. And even though it wasn't about the elegance or the luxury, people were happy. Kids were super happy, and the parents were even happier. So it's really about, I mean, you can have all the exclusive language and messaging and marketing that you want, but it really comes down to what's behind the scenes and how you're really connecting and communicating with other people, and what their transformation is going to be. How are you going to transform their lives?
That's great. So, what advice could you give to people that may feel that their lives don't matter? You know, there are people that maybe either they don't have a job, or they're having troubles finding a job, or maybe they do have a corporate job, but you know they're not like an executive, and they feel like their voice is not being heard. I mean, what advice could you give to people who feel like they don't matter, and like how can they transform that?
Well, again, as they say, fear is false evidence. It's the way you're perceiving it. What I like to do is help people take a look at their strengths. It's all inward. So, what are your core strengths? Because if you're working with those, you understand how life works. So, for instance, if you're more of an educator and you like to educate people, if you're not in a position where you can do that, you may want to rethink what you're doing and look at a way that you can start educating. Whether if you're in a corporate environment, maybe see if you can transfer to their, whether they have a training department or something, doing something that really lights you up and fills you up and plays off of your strengths, because at the end of the day, that is going to help you realize that you matter, because what you're doing creates an impact, and it's something that you really enjoy doing. And I think a lot of people don't think about that. But when you're using your core strengths, like let's say if you're really a creative, and you may not be artsy, but it could be that you have a lot of ideas and you have creative problem solving skills. You have to use those talents in whatever you're doing to make you feel fulfilled. And once you feel fulfilled, you'll start to understand that you matter. And it's a way that you can communicate to others easier.
That's definitely like you bring about like a very interesting perspective. Because you're right. I mean, I've met a lot of people who frustrated at their jobs because they feel their lives are not fulfilling enough. And rarely do I ever talk to anybody who have done any self reflection about what are their core strengths that they can really bring to the table, bring to the community, to humanity, or the rest of the world. I hear a lot of people complain, but I don't think how many people really reflect on what are their core strengths. And even like there may not be some areas that they may not be that good at, but they can find other people to help them in those areas they're not good at. So it's definitely like a big shift in perspective, instead of from like coming from a place of complaining, like, hey, my life isn't that great, it's not fulfilling. Instead of changing to more of a positive, like, hey, I have something really unique, or I have some really like powerful things that I can bring to people. And I think that's a big shift. So I think that's an important lesson for people to think about. So I'm glad that you bring that up.
It really is. And the thing is, you have particular strengths that other people don't, and they have strengths that you don't. And there's no judgment there. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that people are built differently. So it's a matter of honoring your strengths and honoring their strengths. And they can help you and you can help them. So it's a matter of collaborating with people that have strengths different than you. And together that can be very powerful.
So can you maybe explain a little bit more about that? How do you help people find their strengths? Do you have like a particular process?
I do. Yeah. It's something that I developed over a decade of work and just looking at past experiences. And I actually have a quiz that I start people with, and then they get an 11-page report that kind of dives deeper. And if they want to go deeper than that to take it throughout their business or whatever they're working on, then they can work with me directly. And we really do like an audit of their whatever they're doing and their strengths. And we do an assessment of their business. And then it's amazing the gaps that we can find. I call them growth gaps that you don't know because you've never done that before. Most people have never really looked at their core strengths, their number one strengths. Everybody has strengths in all sorts of things, but you have like core strengths and things that come naturally to you that you don't even think about, and you just do them and you're good at them. Or maybe you've developed the skill to be really good at them and you really enjoy them. That makes all the difference in the world. I had an older gentleman who was on his third company, and something was missing from this new company, but he just couldn't pinpoint it. And so I did a workshop with him, and we discovered his core strengths. And he realized that he was actually in the creative realm. And he didn't realize that because he's not artsy, but he has tons of ideas, great ideas. And he has a lot of great problem solving skills, very creative problem solving skills. And so he said, the more I think about this, I think I need to have my partner take this quiz. So she did. She ended up being more of an educator. They realized that there was one, because I do it in threes: the action-oriented type of person, the creative and experiential people that create experiences for others, and then the people that are real educators. So his partner was the educator. He was more of the creative, and they were missing. They weren't doing their like operating procedures. They weren't writing down their ideas. They weren't working on their CRM the way they should. They weren't tracking leads. They each thought each other was doing that, but neither of them really enjoyed that type of work. So we said, I understand what's missing now. And so he went in his company and he looked, through everybody, and he found a person that was perfect for the action-oriented items, the organized action. And he promoted this person up in this third partnership in his company. And he said it's just changed the entire company. So it can get that deep.
That's really amazing. I never knew that that was even possible. I just thought are people left brain, right brain? That's really it. And that's like you're saying, it's more like surface level understanding people's core strengths. It's more than just are you left brain, right brain, or are you an engineer or a doctor? There's a lot more to understanding your core strengths.
Because engineers can be creative. They can be on the cusp of creative and action, but could be more creative because they have to come up with creative problem solving to solve whatever they're doing. So it's looking at it a lot differently. And there are different facets of being creative that I've explored, and really helps people to dig into what they're doing and why. And then the audit is really important to see where their paths are, what's holding them back and why. So it's even this same gentleman, we went farther, and he had an opportunity to work with financial advisors, but he didn't realize what was holding him back. And it was taking him months to try to figure out how we could get a workshop together. And when he was working with me, he realized because he was a creative and they are more structured and action oriented, it was stopping him, but he didn't know why until he found out his strengths. So that night he went home and he put some creative ideas into this outline for a workshop. And now he created an outline that he can use for his workshop and sell this workshop for $25,000. So it was just a matter of understanding who he is and who they are to put something together that can help both. It's not so much that you always have to look to the outside and look to your clients. You first have got to look inside. What can you do? What do you enjoy doing? Because it's going to come across to whoever you're interacting with.
And I think what you're saying is so important because I said before, it's I feel like a lot of people, they're kind of running on automatic. They just get up in the morning, go to work, and they're not. A lot of people are not happy, and they're not thinking. You said that because they're not doing a deep dive enough of what are their core strengths and who they really are and what they can offer to people. and but you're showing this different perspective, which is like really wonderful because it's like I want people on the audience to really see that there's hope, there's optimism, there's like everybody can make a positive impact in the world, as you were saying. Like everybody has their own unique gifts that they can share with the world. So it's really wonderful.
It's just like a checklist. People can have checklists, but the thing is, they can easily become legacy checklists, which means that they're in the past. They're not helping you today in terms of what's happening. You have to continually update these checklists to go with where you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And some people get stuck in this checklist for a very long time, and they're not doing themselves a favor because they're stuck in the past. So you have to keep updating those checklists too. And people that are creative, it's not in their nature to be consistent, like completely consistent with things. So checklists make people like nervous, and it makes it like a drag to them because they feel like they're losing their creative touch. So they have to kind of look at a checklist from a different light. Maybe a little structure, but not so structured because it's too enclosing for them. And so people that are doing work and jobs like that, and they're frustrated all the time, it could be because if they're following like a checklist sort of thing, it's not their natural way of working.
Now you've worked for some major companies like Playtex, Warner Brothers, Google. What powerful lessons did you learn from your experiences working for those large companies?
I didn't work for them. They were customers.
Our
So,
customers.
yeah, I had to, and it was all like new things. So even Playtex, it was one of the first digital production studios for packaging in the country. So I had to earn their trust because this was a brand new process, all 3D computer graphics, and taking their whole Zermac line of hair care products and digitizing the whole process, including the design part of it. And so just from design to print. So I had to make sure that I knew what I was doing and I knew what the equipment could do, and then try to show them the possibilities of switching from their manual processes to digital. So I had to earn their trust. If they didn't trust the process and didn't trust me, it wasn't going anywhere. But going through that process, it helped me realize like how much people need to know and how you need to communicate with them to get them to open up and understand. And in the end, it worked out amazing. I didn't even really know how it would work out because this was all so new, but I knew that we would have a good result. I just didn't realize how good it could be. So we did over 60 different design variations, and selected 3, and then it came down to 1. And we did that from the beginning into print in under 4 weeks, which it would have taken them 6 months just for the design phase. And they never would have done 60 designs. They would have had 3 to work with. So it's amazing what you can do with something new. Even if it's just a new way of working or a new service that you're providing, you never know how much impact you can really create until you just do it.
So what does business brilliance mean to you? And why do you believe discovering, one's brilliance is critical to entrepreneurial success?
I think it's critical to everyone's success. I just call it business brilliance because your brilliance is your core strength. That's what your brilliance is. It's what stands out. It's what shines. It's what comes natural to you because those things light you up when you're working. People can see it and they're excited to work with you, and you like the work you're doing. So if your business brilliance comes out and you use it, it can change your whole life, just like it did for several of my clients. Even for the Playtex group, it changed their entire way of working, and they got better results.
Okay, great. That's really important, as you mentioned. And you talked about like your AC system before. and it's all about ease and flow. You share like an impactful story that demonstrates how that's really transformed people's lives of, having more ease and flow. Because it seems to me that a lot of people are making things too complicated these days.
They really are. There was a woman that I worked with who was completely stressed out, and she was working with like the nervous system, helping people with their nervous system. And she was completely stressed out, and she said she has to get over this, and she couldn't figure out why. And so when she took my quiz, she realized why. And she said that it just immediately melted the stress from her. And she said that the reason was that, like, she was getting judged by a lot of people, including mentors that she worked with, why she wasn't doing this and why she wasn't doing that. And it was because she was a creative. And there are certain things that she was doing and couldn't figure out why, but she understood that she was more of a creative person. So she didn't like posting every day, creating content and posting every single day. And she didn't really enjoy that. And that was just one thing. And so what she decided to do was hire out. So she can write and give direction on what she wants, but she has that person do the mechanical stuff, like, because it takes time to post it on different platforms, because every platform is different. So there's, technical things you have to know, like sizes of things and the number of words and everything. So she's letting someone else do that and let someone else do the posting. That alone has changed her whole view of things. And when people criticize or they judge, she now realizes that she's to let that go, because she knows what she's good at and what she needs help with. There's nothing wrong with getting help with something, because other people have those strengths that you don't have, and you have strengths that they don't have. So it's really an understanding other people and understanding how to collaborate best.
So can you tell us about like a lot of your work revolves around simplicity. How do you realize the importance of simplicity, like was influencing or impacting your own life and work?
Because I started out with a lot of complexity, especially in what I was doing. And I was trying to get, when I was doing my content marketing company, that was just on the cusp where companies realized that they had to communicate better with their customer versus all the features and the selling and all of that stuff. And so I came up with a process called the CENTER process, which was CENTER: connect, engage, nurture, trust, educate, repackage, plan, and share. Very long process, like 8 steps or pillars to it. It was too complicated. And so over the years, I realized that I can only do bits and pieces. And that's when I started to work with entrepreneurs and said, this is really crazy what they have to go through with all these tactics and even what I'm doing. So I decided to just simplify everything. Being able to simplify allows you more time, more free time. It allows you more time to spend with your programs and your clients. Just makes life a whole lot easier. And I actually have a good story about conversations and about trusting the journey and having simple conversations. Do you mind if I tell you that story?
Yeah, please share.
Okay. This was all from a simple conversation. It was about a compliment. A compliment opened the doors to a 140-year-old culinary secret. And how I discovered this was I went to a local Mediterranean restaurant. It was amazing. They had the best sourdough pizza crust that I've ever had, and their pizza was phenomenal. And so as we were leaving, I had to compliment the man standing at the door, who was really a stranger to me, but I knew he was part of the restaurant. He just happened to be not the manager, but the owner himself, and his name was Matthias. And he started to tell me, and I told him how amazing his sourdough pizza bread was. And I've never seen sourdough bread pizza like that before. And he said, well, there's a special story. Do you know about our story about the special sourdough? And I said, no. And he said, well, he met a man on a plane to San Francisco. And he shared his dream about opening a Mediterranean restaurant with his very own sourdough starter. And the man just happened to be a chef, and over the years perfected his own sourdough starter bread. So he invited Matthias to contact him when he does open this restaurant. And he would share a secret by personally delivering it to his new restaurant. So on top of that, he said he promised to train Matthias if he did this on his, he'd train his entire staff on how to feed it and use it and those sorts of things. And so 6 months later, Matthias flew to San Francisco because he decided to open this new restaurant. And he was anxious to get a taste to see his starter dough bread in action because he wanted to do that before he purchased it for his new restaurant. And so when he got there, it turns out it really was special. And he found out that it was over 140 years old, and it was from St. Vith, Belgium, which is the world's only sourdough library in the world. And it showcases about 105 sourdough starters from around the world, which I thought was amazing. I didn't even know there were that many. And they're all kept in special refrigerators, and they're fed every few months. And so now Matthias has a piece of one of those starters, and his dream not only came true, but it was better than he could ever have imagined. And it's a gift that keeps on giving. And in fact, one loaf was about 2 feet long. It was like the perfect piece, like loaf of bread that we would ever see. And the experience is basically a perfect reminder to step out of our comfort zones and engage others. Because of this one simple conversation, he was able to not only, have a dream come true, but way better than he ever imagined. So you don't know what incredible opportunities can come from just a simple conversation. And so the takeaway is a simple conversation can change everything. Sometimes that's all it takes, or even a curious question to unlock an unexpected opportunity. So inspiration often comes when we take a moment to connect with someone. We never know who we're going to speak with that carry out our story. Number 2 is share your dream, because you never know who might be listening. Like Matthias shared his vision with a complete stranger on the plane, and that one moment of openness led to a once-in-a-lifetime gift. And 3 is trust the journey. Matthias didn't take the offer lightly. He followed up, and he traveled, he learned, and he was committed to understanding his journey. And so now he has a great sourdough recipe that he's now part of a rare living legacy. Inspirational stories often come from people who take intentional action, even when it's uncomfortable. And then I have one bonus takeaway. Kindness often comes with ripples. The original chef didn't just share a recipe, he shared a legacy. He trained his team, and he poured his heart into Matthias's vision. True generosity can create a lasting impact. So if you think about going from transaction to transformation.
Wow, that's really interesting. I never knew there was a sourdough library before. And
Neither did I. And I looked it up and I saw the refrigeration. So 140 years old. I didn't even know something could last that long.
Yeah, that's definitely
starter at that.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, and it shows you like you never know. You start a simple conversation, you don't know what doors that may open up or what transformation you get, so you never know.
And it's all, like the simplicity of what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I personally love sourdoughs. I kind of like the story. I like sourdough bread. So, but it's never known, like, even things like sourdough, you can teach you something new.
It really can. And I have a gluten sensitivity. So the only thing that I can eat that really, I digest very well is sourdough. Especially the sourdough that only has a few ingredients, because you don't have, a lot of the other stuff. So I think it's a little more than gluten. But the sourdough bread, especially something like this, was really special.
I know you often talk about like feeding yourself first. Can you share how prioritizing your own well being made you a better entrepreneur and coach?
Yes, because if you think about it, um, it was Oprah that said, you have to fill your cup first before you fill others. Because if you're dragged out and you're like exhausted, it's really hard to be motivated enough to work with clients. So you really have to be, they want to see you motivated and they want to see you upbeat. Of course, you'll have days that where you're not completely, upbeat, but you got to get in that mode to really help people because they have to see that, they want to see your result because they want to be at that step, that at that stage at the end. And if you're completely exhausted and you're unhappy, other people can see that. They can feel it and they can sense it.
That's really amazing. Yeah, I agree with you 100% because I know some days, like if I'm extremely tired and I didn't eat well, I'm kind of groggy, you show up differently. And if you show up differently, you're not going to be 100% of yourself and then can't give 100%. And you said people can definitely, uh, they can feel that, you know?
And a quick way to get out of that is I do exercises too with each of the strengths. And one is you need to get up out of your space because if you're in your space, there could be, like I call it stagnant air, stagnant energy. You need to get up and do something else. And it's amazing how much refreshed you will feel, whether it's just going outside for a little walk, whether you put on some music, whether you get on a treadmill or you get on you just do some walking or you do some running and you come back, you will feel so refreshed. And you may even get ideas while you're doing whatever you're doing. It could be yoga, it could be, just driving around the block or could be going to a store or, whatever, but just get out of your space instead of sitting there.
Yeah, I do that sometimes, like when I have busy days and like you said, I take breaks and it's like I go outside, get some fresh air, I go for a quick walk, and it does make a big difference. Sometimes you don't even realize you're sitting in front of a computer all day, and then at the end of the day, it really takes a toll on you if you didn't do
It
that.
really does. Yeah, it really does. And the funny thing is, I know there are people that schedule time blocks for things. That doesn't always work. You have to follow your body. You have to follow how you're feeling at the time because if I take a break, if I have set up my time clock for 10 or let's say 11 o'clock, I may not be in the mood to take a break. I may be in the middle of something that if I take a break, I'm going to lose my thinking and I don't want to stall or procrastinate what I'm doing. So I don't do breaks like that. I do breaks when I feel like I need one and I have, the extra, even if it's 5 minutes to do that. And I may do it more throughout one day than another day.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Can you maybe share like what powerful mindset shift helped you transition from your corporate roles in the past into like coaching and entrepreneurship that you're doing now?
Well, because in corporate, they do amazing things, but you don't always see the end result or the transformation because it goes on to a different department, et cetera, et cetera. Um, Working with entrepreneurs, I can see results immediately. And then I can follow through with what happens, could be a week, could be a month, it could be a year down the road. So you're constantly seeing things changing and results and wins and different emotions and things. So it's constantly evolving. And I really like that. I like to be able to see the results of something. If you're working with someone and you don't see results or you don't see what's happening, it's hard to know whether what you did worked or whether you need to adjust something because everyone is different. So even if I have, like a process, I may have to alter that process because nothing is paint by numbers. Nothing is, doesn't work for everyone. I don't care what strategy out there. Strategies and tactics work, but not for everyone.
Do you have any inspiring stories from maybe even your clients who embraced your unique, signature strength method, and how did like change their, their lives or their transformation?
Sure. There was one woman that I worked with who she she know that she had like a lot of different um, like programs that she worked with, templates she was using, certifications, and she kind of got lost in it. She didn't think she had anything new to offer, and she looked at herself just like anybody else taking those courses, using those templates, using her certifications. And so we worked together because I said, no, you definitely have uniqueness because not everyone has done everything that you've done. And so we looked through her experiences, we looked through everything that she did, and we came up with, and I'm big on frameworks because once you understand your strengths, then you can weave them into what I call your foundation or your framework. And that's the essence of what you're doing. And it's not a step-by-step numbers thing, but I usually work with 3 pillars so that you're putting, different categories together. And so people know that once they go through stage 1, they have stage 2 and they have stage 3, but there are different segments within each of those. And so we came up with something for her that was basically something that she believed in. And there were 3 parts to it. And so she had a specific audience that she was working with. But all of a sudden, and she was really happy because she was able to consolidate her information into something that was unique. And within a couple of weeks, she was able to get on a podcast, and she was able to, communicate what her new business was about in a very good way, and she was very comfortable with it. So it was about 3 to 4 months later, she worked with some people and decided that she wanted to completely change her niche. And she said, "Oh no, do I have to start all over again?" And she didn't, because she looked at what she did. She could take the same framework and just adjust it to a completely different audience. So that's the importance of having a framework that's adaptable and that plays off of your strengths.
Wow, that's really
It's
amazing. You have a lot of great stories.
Yeah, it simplified like her whole idea of her business because it allowed her to realize that it was okay to adjust, and you will adapt as you go. Obviously, I've renamed my company 3 times now to adapt to what was happening until I finally have something that I feel comfortable with and that I know that I can easily adapt to. Because, life and business change so quickly.
Yeah, you definitely have to be on your toes these days and shift where things, the way life goes these days.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, it's changing daily. So if you have, but what doesn't change are your core strengths. That doesn't change. So that's the one thing that is consistent would be your core strengths. It's just how you're using them and when you're using them and why you're using them.
Can I ask you, what was your most impactful learning moment as a business coach?
Um, I think looking at a lot of people don't feel like they have the value to bring. Like they're doing all sorts of things outwardly and they don't realize how much they can help someone. They're just looking at the pieces, whether it's the hook, the funnel, the strategy, the tactic, and they don't realize that they have what they've done, how they put things together, their experiences, how they've come out of something can really help someone else. And I think that was probably the biggest eye opener because you kind of think that everybody knows that, but they don't.
That is kind of interesting because you say like sometimes people You said on the outside, it looks like they're doing all this impact, but on the inside, they don't feel like they're making really, I guess they don't really value themselves that much.
Well, I think it's more of a lot of programs, a lot of things look at the outside. They say, yeah, look at your niche, and they just jump on that. But they don't really dive deep into what a person is all about. And that I think is what's missing. Because even like that story I told you about why I changed my name, a lot of people look outwardly like they're looking at those 3 luxury hotels. And it's like the fourth is the fourth on the list, probably with the most reviews, but it's not luxury. Why is it number 4? See, people forget about the internal part of it. They just think, oh, it's luxury, it's $700 a night, but they're not looking deep inside. And that 4th hotel says it all, because even though it was marketed as the Magic Castle, people thought, wow, Magic Castle is probably grandiose. It's like a Disney, but it's a different perception. It's more internally, because this was not about the grand part of it. This was about the internal part. It was about treating people, with respect and kindness, and creating an experience where they feel like they're respected and they feel like they're important. That's what that was all about. And I think that's, like the kids were lit up, the parents were lit up, everyone was joyful. It's because of the experience. It didn't matter that it was in, a 1950s bright yellow hotel with a small pool. It didn't really matter that, the best rooms were overlooking, an alleyway, because they got a different experience that they'll never forget. So it was about the feeling part of it.
What would you say has been so far the most courageous decision you've made professionally? And how did it inspire your own growth in life?
It was probably when I left corporate, because I was able to kind of pick and choose what I wanted to do, which is a huge change, because when you're in corporate, you have to follow the plan and follow, each company has different rules and things that you do. And I mean, you can get a little bit out of the box, but not when you're on your own. And I mean, it's not an easy road because, you have to do the job of a lot of people, but you pick and choose what you get to do.
When you left corporate, were you a little bit scared? Did you at one point, in the very beginning stage, have self-doubt? What am I doing? I had a nice corporate job. Is this really the right decision?
Well, I was, and the reason, the big reason that I did leave was because I had my daughter, and she was a preemie, and so I had to cut the hours down because the daycare didn't even want to take her. I mean, I took a couple of months off, but then I had to go back to work. So I went back as a consultant 3 days a week, and I had her at a daycare that I could walk to from work. But then 9/11 hit, and they laid off a bunch of people, and I was one of the last consultants to go. So that's when I made the decision to, not be in that predicament again.
Wow. I think it's very inspiring that you did that. I mean, it was very courageous of you to move forward. But look at all the people that you've helped as a coach, consultant.
And like I said, in corporate, except for when I worked with the big companies and we did the drastic changes, I could see the results. But that was, customer to customer, or I was, the vendor and they were the customer, and I was working right with them. So I could see the results. But normally in business, you don't see results like that. You kind of hand it off to the next person. So I think that was the biggest aha moment for me, where I could really take charge and help with the results and see the results, when in the entrepreneurs and coaches that I'm working with.
So how does the CS effect help entrepreneurs reclaim their focus?
it's create space, basically. Create space for all sorts of things. You need to create space for your strengths, create space to just think. You can't be creative if you have clutter. If your mind is cluttered, you're completely busy. It's really hard to be creative. And everyone has a little bit of creativity in them because they come up with ideas and ways to do things. They just need to help to get it out. Creating space for success, creating space for other people, it takes, it's all part of your life. It can help with that, stops you from being burnt out, basically. It helps you progress and it helps you move on to bigger and better things.
As you encourage entrepreneurs to be free and to scale, what personal barriers have you had to overcome to find your own freedom in business?
Well, as I was developing this, I had to really hone in on what I wasn't good at, or better at. Because developing this, I had to understand what it was like to do those things. And so I think that was probably the hardest part, because there were times where I wanted to get someone to help me, but I struggled through it so that I could define this process. Because I don't like to guess at things. I like to do things and prove things. And so that was challenging, but I knew I had to do it. And there was a reason I was doing it.
That's wonderful. But you obviously have overcome so much so far, So I think you're a huge inspiration to a lot of people that maybe feel stuck or confused. That you can be a successful entrepreneur as yourself. I think that's very inspirational. Especially like you said, you had a baby. I mean, that's a job in itself.
Yeah, there were so many different bumps along the way, but you kind of just have to pick yourself up and keep going, because there's no point in feeling dragged down about it, because there are ways that you can feel better about things. And everybody has so many talents that maybe they don't get, but I can help them find it because there are a lot of people that are so talented. Everybody has talents.
Well, what inspiring advice would you give entrepreneurs who feel stuck or overwhelmed, but yet they still dream about making a deeper impact?
Again, I would say really find your strengths and work with them. That's the biggest, that is the biggest advice I could give you, because your strengths never change. I can't say that, your business will never change, because it will change. As you work with clients, things will change, but your strengths will always be there.
So if somebody had a question about our interview today, or they're interested in working with you so they can find their own strengths and how they can find, why they matter and develop their self-worth by working with you, what are the best ways to get in touch with you?
Okay. And I'm sure you'll put these in the show notes, but you can connect. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm also on Facebook. So you could DM me or message me on LinkedIn or Facebook, or you could email me. And you'll put those in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely. They'll be in the description underneath the podcast. So do you have any final words you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap up this podcast for today?
Let's see. I would say, gosh, there's so many things. I would probably say is always think of less is more. Find your perfect balance between, simplifying. And once you start to feel overwhelmed, try to simplify. Always think less is more. More stuff leads to chaos. If you keep it simple, that leads to bigger, faster success.
Well, Deb, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing your inspirational stories, especially the sourdough one. That was really interesting. I never thought I'd hear an inspirational story about sourdough. It's like
It was
definitely very
very
creative.
unusual.
Yeah. No, but I liked it very much. So again,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much for coming on and sharing all your experiences and giving us advice to the audience. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience will really appreciate it very much.
And Daniel, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, Deb. It was my pleasure. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.